Can you hear me? Uh-oh.
I cannot see you.
Uh-oh, hold on. I need to switch.
Okay. You good?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I switched to Kula W. The connection is way better today.
Yeah. It's really fickle. It's very, very
Yeah. On guest, it popped up right away and said connection was unstable.
Mhm.
So I'm on W now and it appears that it's fine.
Okay, good.
So everyone's coming in now. So
Wonderful. It's good to see everybody. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. Oh, so wonderful. I take it was a beautiful morning there.
yes.
Good.
A little chilly, but outside, but very nice.
We had the dog run this morning, or the fox hunt, or whatever it was. All the horses going down the street, and it started with, I sent you the picture of the little girl on the pony.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just thought it was a neighbor, taking her daughter out or whatever on the pony. But then all of a sudden, there were about 100 horses behind the pony, and yeah,
That's
so
interesting.
and they're all dressed in the English riding get up, and then so they all go down the street, and then when they came back, they had about 50 beagles with them, and all you hear is the sound of horse hooves and barking dogs. It was pretty. Yeah, they do that every year here. They don't, I think it's a pheasant thing now. It used to be fox, but there's no more fox on the island that I'm aware of. So
awesome.
Yeah. So
right, I'm gonna put you on. I'm gonna mute our side.
Okay.
Are we okay though? The feed is good?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. All right. Here we go.
Right. Good. Thank you, Casey. Hello, everyone. So good to see you all this morning. Hello. Thank you so much for driving up to the ashram and spending the morning with everybody there, and for staying and taking part in this beautiful conversation of our spiritual nature. So let's start by sitting tall, and we'll close the eyes and just take a moment to settle in. As you breathe in and as you breathe out, just remind yourself, I am here now. I will be present now. I will leave the past behind for a little while, not worry about the future. I will give myself permission to be here now. And then drawing the hands together in front of the heart, we'll chant one beautiful Om, followed by the invocatory mantras. Take a breath in. Om. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapati Gom Hava Mahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anafshrinvanuti Bisidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha. Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Divo Brahataf Parvatada Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagman Nova Chamushati Shrinotu Vagdevye Namaha. And bowing the head to the heart, acknowledging all that is. Draw the face to center, release the hands. And welcome. So good to see each and every one of you today. So today I thought we would talk about knowledge and the means of knowledge. These are called the Pramanas, the Pramana, P-R-A-M-A-N-A. And the word Pramana translates to how we know what we know, how we acquire knowledge, how, and there's many modes to this, there's 6 of them. So all these different ways of acquiring knowledge have a very profound meaning to us, especially when we tell ourselves that we're on a spiritual path that involves self-awareness, that involves understanding or coming to know a bigger truth, a more inclusive truth. And so these ways of acquiring knowledge are very important for us to understand, because each one has its gifts. Each one has absolutely, multiple circumstances that it brings knowledge to us, but not all the types of knowledge that come to us are as valuable as others. And so understanding the way that we receive knowledge, the way that we perceive and receive, and then understanding the pitfalls to that as well, very important to us on this path of self-awareness. And so Pramana, or Pramana, the means for acquiring knowledge. And the first one is perception. Perception is the first way that we acquire knowledge. And perception in Sanskrit is called pratyaksha. Pratyaksha. So perception basically are of 2 kinds. The first type of perception is sensory. So what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch really feeds into our perception of the world. It feeds into our perception of our understanding of the world, of the understanding of our circumstances, of our relationships, of our likes and dislikes. This perception, when it's driven by the senses, is very transitory and changeable. Because, you can go to your favorite pizzeria and get your favorite pizza, and they have the same chef. And so you know what you're going to get. And you know that this pizza is going to be amazing, because it's always amazing, because your sense of taste tells you so, your sense of smell tells you so. And so this sensory perception won't let you down, right? Until they change chefs. And then they get a new chef in, and you go there with the expectation that the pizza is going to be the same as it was previously. Only this chef is not so seasoned. This chef doesn't make the paste the same way, or the dough the same way. And so because of the changeability of the world that we live in, because of the changeability of our circumstances, any knowledge that comes to us by way of perception is also highly changeable. Therefore, it's not something that we can rely upon all the time. Certainly, there are some types of perception that we have that we can rely on more than others. But we should always keep in the back of our mind that when we are basing our understanding or our motivation or our intention or our actions on perception only, that there is a chance that we are misunderstanding. The second type of pratyaksha comes from the mind. And this is similar to the senses in that it originated there, but it's more of a memory. It's more of a recall. And so the pizza works there too, right? So the pizza, that is a memory, the memory of the way that the old chef used to make it. And so now moving forward, there'll be a sense of dissatisfaction with this new chef, because I remember how the old chef used to make it, and the old chef made good pizza, and this new chef makes horrible pizza. And so, but there's no other pizzeria open. And so we go back to that pizzeria kind of begrudgingly with our friend or our partner because they really want pizza. And we're like, well, I'm just telling you, it's not going to be good. It's going to suck. It's going to be horrible because this chef just doesn't know how to make pizza. But then we get in there and the smell is amazing. And now our, taste buds are starting to water, and we're starting to look forward to trying this out. And so we take a piece a little begrudgingly, and what we find is that this pizza is actually amazing. So these sensory impressions and the mental state that we carry forward with us that has to do with perception, highly changeable. And therefore, we should not rely on that solely. We should never think that we know everything that there is to know about a particular circumstance, a particular person, a particular anything. We should always understand that our perception can be highly biased, can be based in misunderstanding, can be and is very changeable based on circumstances that we find ourselves in. The second type of, the second means for acquiring knowledge is inference. This is called anumana or anumana, A-N-U-M-A-N-A, anumana. And this is basically, inference is when we reach a conclusion based on one or more observations, combining with previous truths, combining with things that we have seen in the past. And the most oftentimes cited example of this is smoke and fire. And so an individual sees smoke up on the mountain and says, well, smoke is an indication of fire, and that's been a truth my whole life, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. So someone must be running a fire up there. And so this type of understanding, this type of acquiring wisdom is very useful. It's very useful for helping us get through our day. And, when the weather is such that it's sleet and hail, and our past tells us that sleet and hail make for hazardous road conditions. So then it can be useful for us because then we know that maybe we shouldn't be out on the road driving in that type of weather. So as long as we use inference, which can also be called making a pretty good guess, as long as we use that in our day-to-day experience of life in a way that serves us, then it's a perfectly fine method, but it's not the method necessarily for acquiring higher truths. And neither is pratyaksha. They both are flawed because sometimes you see something that you think is smoke up on the mountain, but it's not smoke at all. It's actually fog or steam from, I don't know, something that gives off steam. You figure that part out. So it can be flawed as well. So we need to look at these two particular means of acquiring knowledge and just understand that they have utility, absolutely. And they can be a way of leading us in the direction of higher knowledge, but we need to be mindful of the slippery slope that they present as well as we're moving through our day. The third is comparison and analogy, and this is called upamana, U-P-A-M-A-N-A, upamana. Comparison and analogy. And this happens to be the one of the six that many, many schools of spiritual wisdom in what we today call India consider the utmost way of acquiring knowledge, comparison and analogy. So when we're working with comparison and analogy, we're utilizing our intellectual skills. We're not just going off sensory impressions. We're not just going off memory. We're actually engaging the intellect in a rational way of thinking. Many of you have heard me talk previously about in Advaita Vedanta and similar traditions, it's never expected that you just believe in something. As a matter of fact, to just believe in something is considered to be a form of ignorance. that in fact, you should be asking questions. You should be engaged in comparison and analogy. You should be engaged in looking at something and asking as many intelligent questions, intellectual questions as possible about that thing. You should never take something at face value. So upamana is a very powerful means of acquiring knowledge when it's put into play the proper way. But it does have a slippery slope to it. And that slippery slope would be called the ego. So when the ego thinks it knows and it makes a comparison and it says something, let's just say, well, I know that that person is going to behave in that way because in the past that person has behaved in that way. And that's all there is to it. The ego has already made up its mind. It's already made up its mind. It's not actually engaging in comparison and analogy. It's engaging in stubborn ignorance. It's saying that there's no room for change, when the reality is that change is the only thing that we can really count on. So a person who maybe bullied you in high school, they can change too. They can actually become a great humanitarian in their life. And perhaps you were a very kind individual in high school, and you can change too, and you could become a bully. So we have to be mindful that we're actually engaging in comparison and analogy, and we're not just using past experience or an unhealthy ego as a way of dictating the outcome of something in order to satisfy the ego's wants. Somewhere, an unhealthy ego wants that person to still be a bad person. Somewhere, on some level, the ego still wants that person to have that type of a story associated with them, so the ego has something to hold on to. So we need to know that, and to know that when we are in that mode of egotism, that we are not taking part in comparative analysis. We're not taking part in comparison and analogy. So the next one that we have is arthapati. Arthapati is postulation, it's logic. It's very similar to comparison and analogy, but it's time intensive. It's contemplative. It's when you sit with something, maybe in something that you would call meditation. You sit with the idea that God is one. And so you sit and you contemplate on that. And sometimes the knowledge that comes to us is the truth of that statement. And other times it's a struggle. It's a struggle because we want so much to know. We want so much to believe. We want so much for our doubts to be relinquished. We want so much to have the security and the reassurance that these lofty spiritual ideas are true. So this logic, this postulation, this contemplation is time intense, and it's something that you have to spend some time with. Otherwise, it could just be jumping to conclusions. And one of the examples that's often given here is if a person got onto a boat and you saw that person get onto a boat, and then you saw them float away on the boat using the paddles, rowing themselves down the river or the stream on the boat. And then they were gone for a little while, and you knew that they were going to a town downriver. You would postulate that they got there. You would just make the assumption that they arrived where they were going. But they might not have. They could have taken a detour. They could have come upon a sudden storm and capsized. Anything could have happened. So we have to remember that postulation is dependent, proper postulation is dependent on a few things. The first is that it is time intense. So it requires contemplation. And sometimes it requires follow-up too. Sometimes it requires asking, or inquiring, do you know if so-and-so made it to their destination? Do you know if they arrived safely? Before we jump to the conclusion that they did. Now, I know many of you in the room here are parents, just like I am, and many of you are puppy parents. So you have little animals that are under your care. And I think one of the most difficult things about being a parent is not jumping to conclusions, not taking this in the absolute opposite direction. I know, for example, when my kids were teenagers and they were just learning how to drive. Okay, so Casey's the first one, right? Because she's the older. I would sit there and I would stay up. I would never tell her that. If she's in that room right there, don't tell her that. But I would stay up and I would wait for her, because in my mind, I postulated every possible thing that could go wrong with the car, you know? And inevitably, she always came home okay. Inevitably, you know, maybe a little bit late, but she always came home okay. And so you think I would have learned, you know, you think I would have learned that it was just mothers postulating and that it wasn't anything, it wasn't logic-based, it was fear-based. But then Jay came along and Jay started learning how to drive. And sure enough, it was the same exact thing. I would sit there until he came home, and I wouldn't tell him that I was waiting up for him. But while I'm sitting there, every possible scenario of everything that can go wrong is going through my mind. And, you know, Christopher's going to be coming up on his license pretty soon. And so I'm sure Casey and I will probably sit together now and do motherly postulation over all the things that can possibly go wrong. So this is this type of postulation we want to avoid, because this type of postulation is based in fear. It's based in ignorance. It's based in focusing in the wrong direction or in a non-healthy direction. When we are engaged in artapati, we do absolutely want to remember time intensity, contemplation, and following up. Very, very important. Very important that when we run into that bully from high school, as a grown adult, and as a grown adult who has made some type of dedication to the path of peace, that we wait and see, that we don't jump to the conclusion that they're still just a bad person. Right. The next one is interesting. The next one is called anupalabdhi. Anupalabdhi. And this is non-perception. This is non-perception. This is the understanding that knowledge can be derived by the absence of something. By the absence of something, that there's something to learn by non-perception. So you're sitting in that room right now, and there are windows in that room. So that is perception. If you walked into that room and you said to yourself, and there were no windows in that room. If you walked into a room and there were no windows in that room, the absence of windows gives you information. What kind of information might it tell you? Condition. It tells you that's probably a pretty dark room if there's no windows. There's only one way in and out potentially if you came in through one door and there are no windows. It might tell you that it's a bit smoggy, you know, maybe a bit, the word is leaving me right now, but it might be a bit musty in there because there's no windows to open and to let air run through. So there is some, and so maybe you need a fan, right? Or leave the door open. So there is some benefit to this non-perception, this not seeing something. It's called negative proofing, negative cognitive proof, actually. And so this type of information is interesting. It's something that's worth investigating just to know that it's there. But again, slippery slope, because just because something is not present to the senses, to the eyes, to the ears, to the nose, the mouth, the skin, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So this is where we can have a little bit of a conversation about divinity and how some people will say, I can't see it, can't smell it, can't taste it, can't hear it. Therefore, it does not exist. But the sensory impressions that we receive from our eyes, nose, mouth, skin, ears is based in the materialized nature of the world, the materialized nature of Prakriti, Prakriti being nature itself. And divinity, in an utmost truth, is beyond that materialization. It is that materialization, but it's beyond that also. And so in that regard, in the tradition of Advaita Vedanta and related traditions, they say it's very, very important for the student to simply accept the existence of divinity, to simply accept it, because it's not something that can ever be proven by the senses. It's not something that can be pointed at and say, see that right there? That's God. See that right there? That's God. See all those people sitting in that room right there? That's God. Because even though each and every one of you absolutely has the consciousness of divinity in you, is you, as you, it's also so much more than that. So much more than that. So there has to be a part of ourself that cultivates Shraddha, that cultivates intense faith and sincerity in the existence of that which cannot be seen, cannot be heard, cannot be tasted, cannot be touched. But we have to be mindful that we're placing that in its proper context and not simply fantasy, merely fantasy. The final one, the sixth one, is Shabda. And Shabda is relying on word or testimony of reliable experts. So this is not your bartender or your BFF. Nope. We're talking about reliable, an individual who has scholarly understanding. The utmost is to rely upon the word of the Vedas. That's the utmost, according to the Advaita Vedanta tradition. And by Vedas, we mean Vedas or Upanishads or the Puranas or the Brahmanas, any of the books that go along with the Vedas. So that would be the first, is to rely upon those shrutis, those scriptures that have been revealed to the human species. And in addition to that, to rely upon the word or the testimony of scholars who understand those scriptures. To put it in another context is to say, if you needed to have a doctor check out your heart because there was something going on, you were maybe having a lot of palpitations or something, you wouldn't go to your general practitioner to get an expert opinion. You might go there to get the referral to the expert, but you would wait until you saw the expert before you made a conclusion about what was going on. You also wouldn't go to your bartender. You might talk to your bartender and be like, yeah, I have this thing going on. And then they might give you their opinion. You might go to your BFF and be like, well, I don't know what to do in this situation. And they might give you their opinion, but their opinion is not going to lead you to the answer. It may influence you to go to the specialist. The specialist is what is going to lead you to the answer. The specialist combined with your sincere approach to your spiritual path and your sincere acceptance of the existence of divinity. So in that regard, I think we can understand how Shabda, this testimony, it's important that it's placed into the proper context. In these 6 Pramanas, Shankaracharya said, every human being needs to know how to get along in the world. Every human being needs to acquire problem-solving skills. Every human being needs to be able to understand the difference between kindness and cruelty, between truthfulness and gossip, between peace and violence. And in this regard, it is that they rely on their parents and their friends and their community, their society. They rely upon the laws also in some regards, when the laws are just, to provide them with the means necessary to live in this world in a healthy, meaningful way. Similarly, every individual on some level has a call to know a higher truth, the truth of themselves, the truth of their purpose, the truth of their existence. And in that regard, they must rely upon the individuals who are scholarly in that regard, and even more importantly, the scriptures themselves. Because the slippery slope with this one is to think that just because a person is a teacher and just because a person is scholarly means they don't make mistakes, that they don't also misunderstand. And every human being has the potential to misunderstand. And I would even say every human being does misunderstand. So to go to the scholar, to go to the scripture, and to ask for clarification, and then not to be argumentative, but to inquire further. And there's a difference between being argumentative with a teacher and inquiring further. Argumentative is, well, I still just don't believe this. So like, make me believe it. I can't make you believe anything, and it's not my job to do so. There's no teacher in the world that can make you believe anything. That's up to you. If you're going to sit and practice one of the pramanas, all of the pramanas, by way of acquiring the means of knowledge, by way of acquiring knowledge, if you're going to sit and take the time to do so, that is your intention. And my intention is that if you come to me with questions, I will do my very best to answer them. Sometimes there's opinion thrown in there, and sometimes there's not. It just depends on the context of the question and the circumstances that it's being presented in. But I'm also very clear that whatever I say is based in opinion. It's based in my understanding. It's based in the particular circumstances of my learning. And so you should never forget that about me or any other teacher. And always hold that truth in humble regard as you're asking us for guidance. Because we're all human, and we're all seeking knowledge, and we're all in some way, shape, or form invested and involved in moving through these 6 means of knowledge, sometimes on the slippery slope of it all, and sometimes making some progress, if that's even the appropriate word to put there. What is progress? We either have faith or we don't. We either are kind and practicing kindness as a way of life, or we're not. We are either seeing the divinity of everything all at once, or we're not. And that's really the simplicity of it. So we can acquire knowledge. I know. But remember that there's a difference between collecting tchotchkes to put on your shelf of little facts and details that you wish to have be the truth, and to truly knowing the truth and living by that truth. And it's hard. It's very challenging. sometimes, most times, to live by the truth, because the world pulls us in so many different directions. The truth is that, to put it into words is really kind of, but let's say one aspect of the truth is that we exist in unity, that there is this beautiful unity. And that unity can be talked about on a number of different levels. It can be talked about from any of the 6 pramanas. The utmost is that the consciousness of divinity flows through each and every one of us as an unbroken chain of consciousness. So we share that. But then the worldly part of me says, well, that sounds really pretty and poetic and romantic, and it sounds wonderful. But that person hurt me. That person robbed from me. That person talked about me. That person did this. That person did that. How do we reconcile the human experience that we have with the very lofty ideals of the knowledge that comes from the pramanas when they are utilized in the proper way? And I suppose that in and of itself is a slippery slope, because much of the time we think that we are capable of changing our mind. But the mind is like a record that has had a groove put into it, laser beamed into it. And the more that we have experienced the cruelty, the meanness, the gossip, the this, the that, the deeper those grooves of fear and concern become. So there's got to be another way to go about this, rather than just thinking, I can just decide to change myself. I can just decide, that's it. You took something from me, I forgive you. You lied to me, I forgive you. There has to be something deeper than just those words. They have to be true. Our intention around forgiveness, our intention around presence, our intention around understanding and compassion, our application of those things needs to be non-conditional, unconditional. So we would need to surrender. Surrender to the higher truth. And that can mean a lot of things. Well, it can be talked about in a lot of different ways. We'll put it that way. It can be talked about in a lot of different ways. It only means one thing. It means complete faith, complete sincerity of heart, complete presence, absolute, absolute. And that's very difficult sometimes, I think, for people. And I use the example of Gandhi, my understanding from reading his posthumous biography and other writings, is that his faith was so deep, his surrender was so complete, that at the moment when he died, as a person stood there with a gun pointed at him, his only response was not, please don't shoot me, was not, you don't need to do this, was not any kind of a plea. It was to look into the eyes of the aggressor and to say, I forgive you. Period. Now think about that. How much would it take for you to look into the eyes of another human being who has done something harmful and simply forgive? Please don't do it before you're ready. Please don't go around and just be like, I'm forgiving everybody, because some forgiveness needs therapy first. Some forgiveness needs very, very deep inner contemplation first. Some forgiveness needs a deeper compassion about the circumstances that happened. Some forgivenesses need time. But still, the ultimate end is that each and every one of us forgives each and every one of us, so that none of us are carrying the weight of ignorance any longer. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if you're frozen. Can you still hear me, Case? Is everything still kosher on your side? Anybody have any questions or reflections right now? It's a little jumpy on my side.
Hi, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, we lost you like right at the very end.
Oh. Okay, let me see if I
Yeah,
can.
it's a little.
So what I summed it all up with was that there are some types of forgiveness that require therapy before they happen. There are some that require long periods of contemplation and coming to understand many, many complicated things before the forgiveness takes place. But the ultimate goal is that each and every one of us forgives each and every one of us, so that we can all move through the world without the burden of ignorance on our shoulders. Now, did that cut out too? How is that? Now you've frozen.
Okay, we got it that time.
Oh, okay, good. Very good.
We got it.
So are there any questions or
We're here. Hi.
Are there any questions or reflections right now?
Anyone? The volume's on, so feel free to.
So no questions? Okay, no reflections?
It's a lot to take in.
It is absolutely a lot. Absolutely it is. It really is. You know, as I'm here at the house in Ireland, I'm supposed to be writing, right? It's coming, but there's a process to everything. And so what I'm doing now is painting. I'm painting rooms. I have so far painted the living room, the entrance hall, the stairwell, the upstairs hallway, and 2 of the upstairs rooms. And yeah.
Well, I'm here.
So I'm spending a lot of time painting, but as I'm painting, I'm putting my thoughts in order. As I'm painting, I'm contemplating on the content and the process of the writing, so that it's a meditation of sorts. You know, it absolutely is. It falls right in with both Artapati and I guess an Upamana, because as I'm sitting there and I'm painting and I'm doing the cutting in and I'm rolling the paint up on the wall, I'm also thinking, contemplating on the best approach to presenting the information that I want to present. And then when the moment comes, I'll sit down and it'll be nonstop writing, probably for, you know, a good couple of days. I'll just write and sleep, write and sleep, write and sleep. And that's, in some ways, that's kind of similar to the way that we can look at these particular means of acquiring knowledge, is that you're not meant to be at the end already. You're not meant to sit down and write the book. What you're meant to do is collect your thoughts, is to sit with the information and say, well, in what way does this affect me? In what way can this affect my life? Is it possible that contemplating on a couple of these might actually be a means to alleviating suffering in my life? Might be a means to lessening the weight that I myself have put on my own shoulders, as far as the things I think I know, the things that I walk around knowing about other people and circumstances. Could this be an opportunity to rewrite some of those stories, to make them more spacious, so that there's an honoring of the journey of not only your own self, but of others as well? Because really, we're not here to point the finger at each other. We're not here to condemn and to ridicule. We're not here to make everyone else into the enemy. But we do that too often. We say, oh, well, they're not doing what I want to do, so they must be the enemy. No, we're here simply to witness each other's journey and to hold a space for that has compassion and empathy about the difficulty of being human. This is no walk in the park. Each and every one of us suffers every day in and day out, either from a fear of lack or something else. We're just constantly in the state of suffering. We fear we won't be loved enough. We fear we'll love too much and it'll be wasted. We fear we won't receive enough food, money, popularity, credit, kindness. Or we fear that we'll give some of that away and that it'll be wasted because they won't appreciate it. Why should I buy them a holiday gift when they never say thank you? Why should I call when they never answer the phone? And so when we start sitting with these pramanas, with these 6 ways of acquiring knowledge, sometimes what we find is that those tendencies begin to change a little bit, because really what these are asking us to do is to come into a deeper state of witnessing, of paying attention to our own behaviors, thoughts, and reactions first, but also to those of others. And don't go to the easy answer. Don't go to the answer, well, they're just a jerk. Don't go to the answer, well, they're just afraid. We're all just afraid. So that's too simple. Now you've got to look at that individual and say, well, why are they afraid? What are they afraid of? And what role am I playing in that? And how do I change my role? It's not up to you. It's not your responsibility to fix anyone. It's not your responsibility to make excuses for anyone. And by all means, you should never put yourself in harm's way. But there are plenty of relationships that each and every one of us has where we are making the other person the enemy, the one who's wrong, the one who's difficult, the one who isn't living up to the drama in our own mind. And so we're going to inflict it on them anyway. And maybe we can start there. Maybe we can stop inflicting so much on other people. And we can just let them be who they are. Just let them be. And if it's something that you yourself are not skilled at dealing with, then step back. And be honest with yourself about that. Say, I'm not ready for this yet. I don't have the skill to stand still for this. I don't have the skill to deal with this person's sarcasm. I don't have the skill right now to do this. And so you step back from it. But you step back not first because they're being a jerk. You step back because you acknowledge that in that moment, you don't have the words to say or the capacity to be unconditionally compassionate or loving, because that person's triggering you in some way, shape, or form. And that's where your work lies. It's not an excuse for their behavior. It's not an excuse for their, jerkiness or whatever you want to call that. It's not an excuse for that. It's saying that you both have your work to do. And sometimes, all the time, every time, what we're actually doing is holding a mirror up to each other. And that mirror is reflecting where the work needs to be done. And so if we look at these 6 means of acquiring knowledge and we focus more on those and their proper utilization, and less on maintaining the stories and doing whatever is necessary in order to maintain the story, then what we might find is that life becomes a little bit easier and our relationships become a little bit healthier. And the relationships that don't have the capacity to become healthier fall away. And that's something that scares a lot of people. They're like, well, I don't want to hang out with those people anymore, but I also don't want to lose their friendship. I don't want them to not like me. And it's like, well, sometimes you can't have both things, you know? Did they like you to begin with if they're always sarcastic and calling you names? You know, did they like you to begin with if all they ever do is call you and complain? Do you take that as evidence that someone likes you? Then maybe you should go back to that inference one and check it out. Contemplation and analogy also, right? If you think that a person coming to you only with their problems and complaints all the time, every time they come to you, is evidence that they like you, it's not. It's merely evidence that you let them complain to you. And then they tell you, oh, you're such a great person. You listen to me every time I call you. And it's like, when was the last time they called you just to say, hey, how are you doing? What's going on with you? Want to get a cup of tea? Talk about the weather? So those difficult relationships, those difficult circumstances are sometimes a call to our own self to look at the way we're holding ourselves in relationship, and then to make adjustments in our understanding. And stop being in relationship with people so that they'll like you, so that there's a sense of popularity or a sense of not being alone. I think it was Alan Watts, who I was just listening to him the other day, and he just says so many things. But he was reflecting on the misunderstanding of loneliness. He said, how can any one of us be lonely? Really, when you think about it, we were born to be alone. We were born to be alone. We were born to walk this life alone. And we were also born to die alone. And the beautiful thing is that we're all walking side by side, doing it. So we have a camaraderie of sorts. I'm paraphrasing greatly what he said, but it made a lot of sense in that moment, you know? And maybe if we look at life a little bit more in that regard, that, you know what, I'm here to walk my path. I'm not here to walk anybody else's path. I'm not here to fix you. I'm not here to awaken you. I'm not here for any of that. I'm here to have a great conversation if you want to have one. You're here of your own free will. I'm here of my own free will. And so we walk together for a little while and we have these great conversations. And what you do with it is your business. I don't tell you what to do with it. I don't say, now you have to go home and put this into action every single day of your life. Otherwise, no. So maybe it's just a conversation and you never do anything with it. Or maybe you do something with it. That's up to you. I'm not here to dictate that. We're not here to dictate to each other. What we're here to do, the purpose, the Dharma, is to come into a knowing of the highest possible truth that we can attain in this life. That's what we're here to do. And these pramanas lead us in that direction if we use them properly. So with that, I'll ask if there's any questions or reflections. Kathy, you look like you have a thought in your mind.
taking it all in.
Mm.
How do you reach acceptance with the knowledge that you can't acquire? How do you reach
Say that one more time.
How do you reach an acceptance with knowledge that you can't acquire?
Mm.
Is that unknown to you?
Oh, that's so good. So that's such a great question, Savannah, truly. Yeah. Savannah asked that, right? I couldn't see if your mouth was moving. Yeah. There you go. Okay. So how do we come into acceptance of the knowledge that we can't acquire, of the things that we'll never know? The first, I guess, is most practical. And that's to say, if you don't know it, you don't need to know it. Not yet. And if you need to know it, you'll know it. It'll come to you. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because there's also times that we do know things, but we deny it. So we do need to go back to the comparison and analogy, to the postulation and the contemplation. We need to go back there and say, am I really more in denial about something that is obvious to me? Or do I really not know? And spend some time looking at that. And then I suppose the third answer to that question would be, if the first statement does not support you in a moment, well, if I needed to know it, I would. And I will know it when I need to know it. If that doesn't support you enough, and if the second one, you've drawn a conclusion that you're not in denial about an obvious truth that you already know, and you're still being called to know something, then ask yourself how else you can go about it. Look at these 6 pramanas and ask yourself, how do I utilize these in order to come to the greatest truth? Now, not to give away the end of the story, but there's only one truth, and everything else is just a minor detail in the end, you know? So what is knowing that going to do to your life? Is it going to make you happy? Is it going to heal you? Is it going to alleviate your fear? Or is it going to change the way you see the world? Or is it just that you're looking for substantiation of something that you already know? Does that all make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We all want to know things. We do. But sometimes we need to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of knowing that? I'll give you a very personal example. So I'm 59. I'll be 60 in October. And for the early part of my life, from the moment that I knew I didn't know who my father was, I was quite driven to find my father. And I mean, there were days where that's all I thought about. It was like, I have to know who my father is. I want to know who my father is. I want to know who my father is. And I would go and have an argument with my mother, who wouldn't tell me, and all these other things. And then there came a moment in time where I was like, do I really need to know who my father is? I might not ever know who he is. How do I come into acceptance of that not knowing? And I don't know, it was just life happened anyway, you know, whether I knew his name or not, life happened. And I just continued doing the things that I was doing in life. And then another day came, and then there was a possibility to find out who he was, what his name was. And so that urge kind of started growing up again inside of me, saying, well, I want to know who my father is. I want to know who my father is. So, you know, if I knew who my father was, then so many answers would be, so many questions would be answered. And I would finally have a sense of identity about myself. And then I found out who my father was. And I'm so grateful to have known to know now who he was, what his name is, and to know that there's other family out there. But the reality is, I'm no different. I'm no different. It didn't do anything, really, except give me more birthdays to remember, more people to love and cherish. If anything, more questions and some sadness too. Because the things that I learned about him were not that he was this horrible person who just didn't want to be bothered with his daughter, but that in fact, to his other children, he was the most amazing dad and he had no idea I existed. And if he did, then perhaps he would have been an amazing dad to me too. So I also had to handle the newfound grief of that reality. So there were some ways where I was no different at all. I'm still me. I'm doing what I do every day. And then there were some things that changed. Now I go on telling you this because this is the reality of every single day of life. Every day of life, you remain the same, but you do also change. Always. So what would knowing this truth, this part of the truth, bring to you? Yes, somebody else had their hand up.
I think that, because I've read before, there's knowledge that we should be protected from until it's time for us to know.
That's a double-edged sword of a question, let me tell you. And I have actually put some thought into this because there are spiritual teachers out there, very wise spiritual teachers, who say, don't teach your students certain things. They have to be ready. And I can appreciate that because there are students who, well, there are teachers who offer students experiences that the student then suffers from. Past life regressions by the 10 pack. Kundalini awakenings. The student doesn't have a whole lot of information, Shaktipat. The student doesn't have a whole lot of information about what's actually happening, and they're told, don't worry about it, or something else. And then they have this experience, and it leaves them with great suffering. It leaves them with headaches. It leaves them with nightmares. It leaves them with fear. It leaves them with questions. It leaves them with so much. So on the one hand, we can say the student wasn't ready to receive whatever it was that they received by way of Kundalini rising or self-awakening. Because if they had, then it would not have increased their suffering in the way that it did. But on the other hand, because everything is layers, everything is like, there's this real super practical level, then there's kind of the mid-range, and then there's this real highfalutin truth. And the highfalutin truth is nothing happens that isn't meant to happen. Nothing happens that's purposeless. Say it that way. There's nothing that happens without purpose. So if the individual had a really strong Kundalini awakening and it fried their nervous system, then there's something there for them to learn. There's more work for them to do, and now they know it. Rude awakening, right? Rude awakening. So how do you say to another person, you're not ready? You're not ready. That can be soul crushing to some people when you look at them and say, you're not ready. You haven't done the work. Nope. So I don't say things like that to students. Instead, what I say is, I am not the one to lead you on this journey. Nope. I've had people come to me and ask me to do past life regressions for them. Could I do one? Sure. Will I do one? Nope. I'm not the one to do that. Why not? Because I do not wish to carry the karma on my shoulders of the harm and the suffering that can be inflicted upon a person when I don't know the state of that person. So I'm taking the responsibility on myself. I'm saying, to be an ethical teacher, there are some things that I won't do. And predominantly because I don't know your status. I don't know. I don't know how long you've been practicing. I don't know how intensely you've been practicing. I don't know any of those things. And because we don't have that kind of relationship, which in India is the guru shishya, is the guru disciple relationship, because we don't have that intensity of a relationship, I don't have enough information. So me sitting there and saying, well, you know, do these practices and get your kundalini to rise up would be really, in my humble opinion, would be really wrong of me. It would not be in line with the ethics that I work to practice in my life. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I think that we can look at that and we can talk about, you know, we can talk about these kind of big harms, like students who experience the Kundalini awakening and they're not ready for it, you know, but the teacher does it to them anyway. But we can also look and say, in what smaller ways am I applying, am I doing that very same thing to other people? In what ways am I expecting more from a person for the wrong reasons? So in other words, moms will sometimes look at their kids and say, why don't you get it yet? Why don't you get it? You should have it by now. Employers look at employees and say the same thing. I expect more from you. That's the same, it's kind of the same thing. It's like saying to a person, you need to be where I want you to be, not where you're actually at. Does that make sense? And if we stop looking at other people in that way, if we stop looking at other people and expecting them to be where we want them to be, that humbles us a little bit. That humbles us a little bit. And that humility opens us up to accepting people where they are. And that's not behind us or in front of us. That's just different than us. That's just different than us. I'll stop there because I love that topic and I could talk for a long time on it. Great question though. Any other questions or reflections before we end for today? Yes, Teresa.
So, so I find myself stuck in my own head a lot and I get frustrated with it. I try to use the tools that I've learned. However, you know, in this discussion, I realize like I'm coming back to these grooves that are in my mind based on this construct of knowledge that I've built. So I've been forming this question, and then Savannah's question kind of led me here. Like, is it the same path? I want to like unknow some stuff, you know, like how do I unknow some of this gunk that is like created this groove? Is it the same? Is it some of these same things that you discussed? Is it?
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, you're going to change over time anyway, just because that's what you do. Right. So there's going to be some things that are profoundly irritating and some things that are profoundly pleasurable to you today that 10 years from now, you won't even remember. So you're going to change. The trajectory of that change is not completely under your control, but some of it is. And yes, if you want the trajectory of that change to be more toward the truth, knowing the truth, then practice. If you don't really care what trajectory that takes, then don't, you know, but if 10 years from now, 5 years from now, a year from now, tomorrow, you intend for yourself and for all beings who are around you to be in a state of greater peace and awareness of unity, then you have to make the modifications to your own self. This is really important. This is the work, right? Spirituality is very high and lofty and wonderful. And it's a great conversation, but it means zero if we don't do the work. If we don't do the work, it's nothing more than a conversation. So the work is, I know I'm going to change anyway. I know that I am always changing. What direction do I want to change in? Do I want to change in the direction of spiritual poverty? No problem. Just don't do anything. Behave in a way that's harmful all the time, hurt people. Not saying you, Tarini, I know you would never do that, but I'm just saying it's like that's the easy way out, right, for people. And that's the direction that most people go in. And it's sad, but it is true. It's the individual who says, I don't want to go in that direction. I'm called to go in the other direction. That individual is more rare, right? It's more rare than the individual who just gives off to their own temptations. That individual will seek out ways to adjust themselves, to look at their own harm and their own commitment to peace, and to make that commitment to peace more profound in their life. And then the individual who does that and stays with it, no matter how many steps backwards, forwards, or sideways life takes, that's an even rarer individual. That individual will meet life as it comes to them, no matter if it's in suffering or if it's in joy and happiness. They'll meet life with joy because they understand that the suffering is not purposeless and the joy isn't purposeless. It all has purpose. All of it. Every bit. So yes, so practice, and then practice some more. And those things that you wish you didn't know, when you came to know them, it was under a specific circumstance applicable to a certain situation. And odds are that situation isn't happening anymore. So remember that everything you learn in life is not applicable to everything else. Maybe a kid is bullied in elementary school, so he learns how to put up his fists and punch. He learns how to punch the bully to protect himself, or to block the bully to protect himself. But wouldn't he be silly if from that moment forward, all he ever did was walk around like this? Right? Because it's not useful. Every single thing that we learn in life is like that. It's applicable to something specific. It's not a general applicability, but we try to make it general. We try to make it one size fits all. So just tell your thoughts, just have a conversation with them. No, you're not crazy if you do it. Have a conversation, tell your thoughts, say, I know you want my attention, but I'm putting myself into the framework of today, and you actually are from yesterday. So take a little break, and I promise if I need you, I'll call you. Let me bring my mind somewhere else right now. Eventually, your thoughts will listen to you. Any other questions or reflections? Yes.
Tell me where I can read about the prananamas. Where do I read them?
You can read them. They are throughout the Upanishads. I'll send you over a document that has them all listed out, and there's something for you to read on them. Yeah. And they're also in the Tattva Bodha. They are in the Bhagavad Gita. They're repeated over and over again in many of the scriptures. And they're in the Vedas, of course. But I'll look and see what might be a really great read and then send you over that, Karen. Good. Wonderful. Let's sit nice and tall, and we'll close the eyes. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. May each of us be guided to use this human life in such a way that we become open to a greater truth, to a greater unity, and to greater peace. Taking a breath in for Om. Om. Hari Om. Jai Mata Di. Thank you all so much for being here today. fluttering the eyes open. Have a beautiful rest of your day. I miss you all so much. I'm so grateful for our time together here on Sundays. Be well, and I'll talk to you soon.